identical among individuals, but for genetic diversity, there is that 0.9%. Also, very important now is to consider epigenome modification. So there are changes on DNA molecules, modification, that do not affect DNA sequence, and these modifications, epigenetic modifications, vary among individuals, and they depend on environmental influence. So I always like to mention this epigenome because, you know, if you remember from your textbooks, from your elementary school and then high school, you know that they always say, so the phenotype is a result of genetics and environmental influence. Now we begin to understand how environmental influence, how we can measure and see on the genetic level the environmental influence. So, genetic and epigenetic variations influence every aspect of human physiology, development, and adaptation. So, understanding of human genetic variation plays an important role in promoting health and combating disease. That means that genetic and epigenetic variation have to be considered in medicine. And today, you may say that all diseases or medical conditions have a genetic or epigenetic component. So, genomics and epigenomics, this is the era of revolution in the field of genomics and epigenomics. Revolution or evolution, because maybe it is not the matter of the moment, so maybe some of you would not agree with me that revolution is a good term, but it doesn't matter. It is really a matter of time that we can measure. Why is this the era of genomics, and why do we believe that the medicine is going to be genome-based medicine? This is because the methodology, we have advanced methodology now and a great progress of bioinformatics, because thanks to high-throughput methodology, which is now available to many laboratories, we have a flood of information about genomes, and so bioinformatics have to take part in this job, and so far I would say that they are pretty successful. So, the first human genome was sequenced for more than 10 years, and the price was $3 billion. Now, in several days, whole genome sequence can be performed, and the price is still more than $1,000. But we believe that soon it will be less than $1,000. So, what are the expectations? It is necessary to sequence as many as possible human genomes, and then to involve those, to compare those information with the medical records in order to understand disease and health. So, it is predicted that up to 2020, almost 1 billion genomes will be sequenced, and the World Health Organization predicts that it will lead to the introduction of personal medicine in clinical practice. So these are the numbers. When we reach 1 million sequence genomes, then we would be able to understand the molecular basis of thousands of human diseases, and we would be able to design targeted drugs to genetic base of the disease. And when we reach 1 million genomes, then we will reach personalized medicine and even genomics-based personalized way of living. So where are the rare diseases in this story? So Nima told you what rare diseases are, and from medical perspective, they are characterized by a large number of disorders, symptoms, and but in the era of personalized medicine, each patient will be considered suffering from unique, we could call it rare disease. So I believe that in the era of personalized medicine, rare diseases will not exist as a entity, as a specific entity, because each patient will be treated as a patient suffering from a unique disease. So this is how personalized medicine will function. So first we have to look for and characterize disease-related genes. Then we can apply molecular diagnosis. Then when we know disease-causing genetic variants, then we can make molecular targeted therapy. And this will lead to prediction genetics, preventive medicine, the implementation of pharmacogenomics, and of course gene therapy. So, if we know the cause, the genetic cause of disease, then we can design molecular targeted therapy for each patient, and then we will reach causal treatment versus symptomatic treatment. I would like just to say at the end something about gene therapy to present you the achievements of gene therapy. So, gene therapy means that you can treat certain disorders using genetic material and changing the genetic material of the patient. So, this is the first successful gene therapy in history. It is used for bowel baby disease, kids suffering from immunodeficiency, very severe immunodeficiency. After gene therapy treatment, were able to leave those balloons, and they went to kindergartens and high schools, and they had pretty normal life. Of course, there were some problems because we used viruses, viral vectors, to introduce genetic material, so there were some problems. But anyway, I would like to tell you that there is a gene therapy product in the pharmacy today. It is called Glivera, and this is the first gene therapy which received marketing authorization from European Commission. So I think that this is the major achievement of genome-based medicine to have really. So in this bottle there is DNA molecule. It is not a chemical. It is DNA molecule. So the future of medicine is we have to perform whole genome sequencing in order to reach personalized medicine. That means prevention, early diagnosis, and personalized treatment. So what do we need from the field of bioethics? So we are faced with a lot of problems. So how who owns the data, the genetic data of the patient, then this patient has patient right to choose to know or not to know about for example, incidental finding when you perform whole genome sequencing, and all other questions we have here. So today we know for some diseases we are, for example, multi-genetic diseases, we are multifactorial diseases. We don't know too much about genomics of those diseases, but for some of them, like monogenic disease, we are very near to the soul of the puzzle. So we need to know if bioethics will be able to follow these puzzles and to reach one day to it. So this is how geneticists understand the human cancer. We translate the knowledge of genetics into clinical benefit, and we integrate laboratory research and bedside care in order to reach personalized medicine, which means long-term benefit. Thank you.
that the outcomes would be better. Also, the better decision of the patient doesn't necessarily mean the better outcomes, because it is a different perspective of a counselor and a counselor. And also, genetic counseling should enable the patient or the individuals to face the test results. So after the decision is made, we get some outcomes, so the patients would live with them or should live with them, so the genetic counseling is also important there. But the things that we don't know for sure yet about genetic counseling is who is providing the service, who is providing genetic counseling, and what is the settings. Is it necessarily the healthcare settings, or it is a non-healthcare settings? We don't have unique guidelines for that, and it is regulated differently. In fact, the practice of genetic counseling are different from country to country. So we have it in one country as a team, genetic counseling team, and in the other one we have a genetic counselor. And in one country, team is working like a group, and the other country has a practice of a team working separately. So people in the team, experts, work one by one. So a person that is seeking genetic counseling will come with one expert and the other one and the other one. So in all of these models, we have a process of decision making and some points about that. No matter which model is used, genetic counseling is a very complex process, and it needs different expertise, not just genetic expertise and medical expertise for sure, but also a lot of training, a lot of soft skills in communication, in risk communication, in management, data management especially. And in this very simple scheme, I just want to point out the terminology, because I have been using the term patient. But yesterday we heard from the philosophy perspective of client, so we could use a different terminology. This is a advice-seeking person, patient, a client, an individual, but also a number of individuals, maybe family is involved in some cases. So it is a counseling, and the advisor could be advisor or advisors, and there are different types of counseling. But I would also want to point out that in many legal documents, in many code of ethics and many laws, it is an obligation and it is expected from the one that is providing counseling, and usually it is referring to the physician, the medical doctor, it is expected to disclose unasked whatever a reasonable person in that patient's particular position would want to know before the individual reaches a decision. So it's very difficult. It's difficult in a common practice, healthcare practice, if you have a patient in pharmacy, to predict what it is that they want to know and what are the information that patient is needed in order to give a consent or make a decision. So that's why I said that genetic counseling is a very complex process and involves a lot of skills and a lot of different expertise and knowledge. And in order to evaluate the service of genetic counseling, we have to build key performance indicators. We have to know the structure, the process, and the outcomes in order to evaluate it, in order to improve, to enhance the service of genetic counseling. So we must know the structure and the process and the outcomes, and in this table you can see classification that we made concerning the structure indicators, process indicators, and outcome indicators for the genetic counseling services. And for the structure would be the access to genetic counseling, human resources, equipment, education, and so on. For the process indicators would be patient education during the process, patient interest developing during the process of genetic counseling. It is also the process of genetic counseling. We could define it and cut it in different steps, so evaluate each step of the process. And for all outcomes, it could be different indicators. You could measure patient expectations, or support the patient received, the decision that was made, and quality of life, and so on. So I've said the decision decision-making process, now we come to decision-making process, is the most important, the core step in the genetic counseling, so the process of decision-making. What patients or individuals expect from genetic counseling? From the counselor, they expect to be experts, to solve their problems, to give them some possibilities so that they can make a decision, and they expect a level of professionalism in those that are counseling. So of course the patients have their own characteristics. The cultural context is important, so beliefs, attitudes of patients, their previous experience with the disease, all the healthcare system, all the council itself, it is also very important for this process of decision making. And there are different types of different models of healthcare professional relationship toward patients. And some of these models of decision making in healthcare are applicable to the genetic counseling. So some of them. One of them is a model of shared decision making. And in this model, you can see it says doctor, it could be a counselor. We have a collaboration. We have a practice of delivering information, but also receiving information. So making opinion, but also changing the opinion of the patient. So the process is aiming to involve patient in the decision. So in the decision making. And nowadays, a lot of talk is being going about collaborative practice in healthcare, and the collaborative model of decision making in healthcare services is also developed. And this model includes more supportive provider and more proactive patient or individual, and also learning through the knowledge share in order to achieve optimal action for decision making. We are at the moment developing the model for the collaborative decision making in our department for the healthcare system, and maybe this collaborative model could be also applied to genetic counseling. We must develop it further. So there are 4 principles in shared decision making. It means that it involves at least 2 persons. So both parties, both persons should take steps, should participate, information should be shared, and the agreement must be reached. It doesn't mean that all the parties agree that it is the best decision, but they agree that this is the final decision and the counseling is finished. And now we come to the role of risk communication. Risk communication is a risky thing, as I said here, because healthcare professionals are not trained in risk communication. And the risk communication differs from the other communication in healthcare because you are identified the unwanted outcomes. And you are talking about the unwanted outcomes. So the possibility that you have the unwanted outcomes is clearly stated. What are the unwanted outcomes? What are they in the future? And how we shall deal with that. So this is the risk communication, and it has its own steps. It's different even for the healthcare professionals to adjust their communication in this risk-based model. Because we attend we are adjusted to a certain type of communication, and we are very reluctant to change, though we know that we wish to change. So these are the steps of the risk-based decision making. First, you have a problem, yes, and you need genetic counseling, and you have some objectives as well. But then you identify the level of the risk tolerance. And you identify the risk and assess that risk. After you identify and assess the risk, you adjust the judgment. You adjust the possible course of action. And after that, of course, you face these adoption options, you make a decision, you implement it, and you monitor it. So I would like to point out that research from empirical research has shown that there are 4 elements in risk-based decision-making process. And these elements are supportive, emotional, informational, and educational. And the research shows that the supportive or emotional elements of counseling provide more benefits to patients than the informational or educational elements. That's why the risk-based decision-making is so important. And the risk communication is important to be involved in the process of decision-making. And also we have some ethical aspects. First of all, respect to the autonomy of the patient, and also patient's confidentiality, privacy, and in genetic testing we have a right to know and right not to know, or right to be informed, or right not to be informed, and also veracity, justice, doing good, not doing harm, and so on. And instead of conclusion, I would say the Serbian perspectives in genetic counseling. Serbia is on a good road to implement genetic counseling in its healthcare system, and many advanced genetic technology and genomic technologies enable patients with rare disease in our healthcare system to use genetic testing for various purposes, diagnostic, predictive genetic testing, and so on. We have a recently adopted Act on the genetic diagnosis, and in that Act, it is recognized the counseling as a process and a medical geneticist qualification. When and which model of decision-making in genetic counseling we will adopt, it is a matter for the future. We hope that we shall have the possibility in our healthcare system and in health policy to develop an interactive model of genetic counseling, and that we will develop a risk communication shared decision model in genetic counseling, because we think that it is the ethically responsible model in decision making when we are talking about genetic tests for patients, especially patients with rare disease. I thank you very much.
Single gene or monogenic diseases are individually rare, but they are numerous. There is more than 6,000, almost 7,000 different monogenic diseases. But in this case, one defective gene is enough to have a disease. So we have clear genetic basis, we have clear pattern of inheritance, and there is high risk to relatives. On the other hand, in multifactorial diseases, we have both genetic and environmental causes that are responsible for the development of the disease. So, if we look closely at the genetic component, we will see that not only one gene is defective. Numerous genes are responsible for development of disease, and each of them has a small effect, unusual small effect. And on top of everything, there is also environmental factors which cannot be predicted. Also, it is important to say that the same genetic variants that are responsible for making multifactorial diseases in some patients are also present in general population, and in some persons they will never lead to a disease. So, we do not have clean pattern of inheritance in multifactorial diseases, and there is uncertain risk for relatives in the family. These are examples of monogenic diseases, only a few of them, because there are many monogenic diseases. And since the cause is one gene, I can say that genetic testing is really reliable, and we need to these patients whether to make diagnosis in a patient or to make prenatal testing or pre-symptomatic or carrier testing in the family of the patient. Here are some multifactorial diseases such as cancers or cardiovascular diseases, and here, since there are many genetic factors, we need to know more about the interplay between different genetic factors in order to have reliable genetic testing. On one side of the spectrum, there is strong genetic component, and on the other side of the spectrum, genetic component is getting weaker, and we have a stronger environmental component, so we can say that not all genetic tests have the same predictive power. Today, in the era of next generation sequencing, we are able to use very good new technology, and we are able to do sequencing much cheaper and much effective and much lower cost than we could ever imagine 10 years ago. So this is really amazing era, and it really makes a difference in the diagnosis for rare diseases, for monogenic diseases. Because it is one gene that is responsible for the development of the disease. But when you look at the patients, you do not know instantly which gene you have to look for a mutation. So instead of previous methodologies, when we had to analyze one gene for one gene, today we can analyze many genes at the same time. With custom gene panels, we can analyze a limited number of genes, let's say 100, 150 genes at the same time. With clinical exome sequencing, we can analyze almost 5,000 genes at the same time. With whole exome sequencing, we can analyze 25,000 genes at the same time, and this is really a good way to have fast and accurate diagnosis of monogenic diseases. However, currently recommendations from Eurogen tests say that the use of next-generation sequencing for the determination of risk factors for multifactorial disease is currently not clinically accepted practice. Obviously, we perform genetic testing because we want to make diagnosis or prognosis. And the main aim is to have treatment, to know how to treat the patient or how to prevent the disease. However, the predictive value of genetic tests for us. Why? Because we do not have treatment and we don't have preventive measures for every disease. If we have treatment, then predictive genetic tests has greater value. I will give you one example of a disease where genetic test has really great value because it incurable genetic disease. It is phenylketonuria, it is non-metabolic disease, and there is a block in one metabolic pathway which causes high phenylalanine level in blood fluids. It causes developmental delay and mental retardation. But if you apply treatment, which is based on reduction of proteins in the diet, so if they cannot eat, you have normal cognitive development. So if you look at this picture, the difference between untreated and the child which has been on the diet, and these two children have the same genes, it is obvious how good and effective treatment there is for phenylketonuria. But there is one big point, and that is that we have to perform treatment before symptoms, because symptoms cannot be reversible. Once you have mental retardation, there is no going back. So you have to actually have preventive measures. Actually, we have neuroscreening in the majority of countries, so the baby is tested, and before symptoms occur, we can apply the treatment, and these children will be cured. Of course, we can do genetic testing before implementation of treatment in order to ensure correct diagnosis. So when we talk about utility of predictive genetic testing, it's obvious that they are ideal for preventable diseases. They have high value for diseases such as phenylketonuria or multiple endocrine neoplasia type 2, where there is possibility of implementing highly effective preventive treatment before symptoms arrive. And if we deal with diseases where there is no such an effective preventive treatment, then utility of predictive genetic tests is lower, or sometimes it can even be harmful. So at the end, I would just like to conclude that new technologies are really important. They bring benefits to diagnosis and treatment of patients, but and predictive testing is very important sometimes to make the difference between life and death, to make the difference between normal development and mental retardation. But in some cases, symptomatic treatment is still not valuable enough, or sometimes it could be harmful. So we have to be really careful to know the difference, to know when to test, who to test, and when it is used wisely, predictive genetics definitely leads to cognitive performance. At the end, I just mentioned co-workers from molecular biomedicine, and thank you all for your attention.
Medicine of 21st century human-based medicine. Nutrigenomics tries to identify and understand the interaction between nutrients and dietary bioactive molecules on the molecular level with the human gene. Pharmacogenomics, similarly, study variation in DNA sequence and gene expression related to cell biotics and drug efficiency and toxicity. In both cases, these bioactive molecules, dietary or drugs, could be involved in intracellular processes and thus affecting human health and disease. The concept that diet influences human health is an ancient one. It is written that Hippocrates used to advise medical doctors and said to want to kill, if you can kill your patients with food. Terms nutrigenomics and nutrigenetics have slightly different meaning. Nutrigenomics identify all the genes in the genome involved in physiological responses to diet, and nutrigenetics study individual genetic variation, their interaction with nutritional factors, and association with health and disease. You all have heard sometimes about some common known interactions between food and genes. For example, you know that some people could not tolerate milk and milk products. That's because they have a deficiency in one gene that is involved in the metabolism of these nutrients. Also, some people cannot tolerate alcohol because they have some defective enzyme that is involved in an alcohol metabolism. And also, what is in focus recently is cellular disease. People who could not tolerate gluten and food rich in gluten they have set of genes. They are important for this metabolic pathway. In our institute, we perform some common nutrigenomic tests, and some of them I have mentioned in the previous slide. And this list is getting bigger every day and every month. So that's our way, how we apply our knowledge and our research for these analyses to become available for people with the ultimate aim to have a better life. It is expected in the next decade that nutrigenomics' contribution to public health will be very significant. What is for us as a scientist practically most important is that based on individual genetic background, nutrigenomics has the ability to correct some metabolic imbalance caused by genetics with the proper diet or certain food supplements to prevent or treat disease. So, if you know someone's genome, you can apply personalized or smart diet. Pharmacogenetics and pharmacogenomics, similar to nutrigenetics and nutrigenomics, have that different scope of investigation. Pharmacogenetics is related to single gene interactions, and pharmacogenomics is pharmacogenetics applied to whole gene. Ultimate goal is to give the patient the right therapeutic, right medicine, the right dose at the right time to be in concordance with specific genetic signature of the patients, with patient genotype and or gene expression profile. Previously, when you go to medical doctor for the same diagnosis, they prescribe the same drug. This drug is not, for some group of patients, it is not beneficial, it is not toxic, like they have water. For other group of patients, this drug is toxic but has some benefits. For the third group of patients, this drug is toxic and it is not beneficial at all. And what we want is to identify the group of patients and to give them, at the first place, the exact drug that is not toxic for them and that is going to be beneficial. We can do that by performing a genetic test pharmacogenomic test. And when a person takes a drug, it has to be metabolized through a sequence of steps. So we identify if the person is extensive, intermediate, ultra-rapid, or poor metabolizing that drug. So according to that finding, we could adjust the dose, reduce, or sometimes increase. Or if this drug is not efficient, then suggest alternative therapy. There are a lot of benefits of this approach for patients and for healthcare systems. For treatment of chronic diseases, it is very practical to perform these tests if it is possible, because these are diseases that patients live with them very long, and they have multiple drugs in their everyday life. Also, for drugs that need a long time to adjust the dose by trial and error prescription, patients also benefit from this testing when they use drugs with narrow therapeutic index. That means in very narrow range of those doses. If you miss that range, drug will have drug could have severe consequences or unavoidable reactions, and of course very, very expensive drugs. It is also important to say that using this pharmacogenomic testing, healthcare system saves a lot of money and time for patients. Regulatory agencies from widely recognized from the US and from Europe give some recommendation for genetic testing for several pharmacogenomic markers. Pharmacogenomic markers are these genetic variants that cause different answers to the drug. So for some, genetic testing is mandatory before applying the drug. For some drugs, genetic testing are recommended, and for some are only informative. As science is progressing, those tests recommended or information are going up. So from recommending, they become mandatory. In our institute, we also perform a lot of pharmacogenomic testing, and this is also a way that we want to apply our knowledge as scientists to help people in surgery. And the message for you to take home is that if we apply our knowledge of genomic tailored medicine about tolerance of food and drugs, this will lead to longer life and better quality of life for each individual. And our aim as geneticists and scientists is for this knowledge and these tests to become available for all patients.
I'm Vesna Spasovski from the Institute of Genetics and Engineering, and we talk about regenerative medicine. Regenerative medicine is the process of making living functional tissues in order to repair or replace tissue or organ whose function is lost due to various conditions like aging, disease, damage, or congenital defects. Regenerative medicine can be divided into cell therapy and tissue engineering, even though they are all based on stem cells. So what are stem cells? They are specialized cells with the ability to go through numerous cycles of cell division
while maintaining the undifferentiated state. This is called self-renewal. Under certain physiological or experimental conditions, they can be induced to become tissue or organ-specific cells with special function. It's interesting that cell potency, which is actually the ability to differentiate into other cell types, decrease during development. So at the beginning, at the point of fertilized egg and in stage of morula, we have pluripotent stem cells. These cells actually can give the whole organism. Later, at the point of autosis, we have the pluripotent stem cells, which can be isolated and they can give all the germ layer cells. And later, in tissue, we can isolate tissue-specific stem cells, which can give cells of that specific tissue. So, the good part is that in adults, we can isolate adult stem cells. These cells are multipotent. They found throughout the body after embryonic development, and they are actually found in all organs in our body. They are now isolated from many organs, and among them, I will speak mostly about mesenchymal stem cells, which are cells of mesenchymal origin. They are found in many organs, usually in strong fraction of specific tissue. They are isolated also from different tissues now, and I will talk about adipose tissue-derived stem cells. So, what are the advantages of adipose tissue-derived mesenchymal stem cells? They are easy to obtain, using minimal invasive procedure. They are abundant, so they are 500 times more abundant than the same amount of bone marrow, for instance. They have high proliferative rate, low apoptotic potential, low immunoactivity, and they are capable to differentiate into many cell types, and not only of mesenchymal origin. So here we can see that adipose-derived stem cells can be differentiated with different growth factors into different cell types. So we can imagine that using these cells, we can treat diseases. So in pancreas, they can be also differentiated into neurons, of course in cartilage, liver, myocardium, and so on. So the potential use of these cells are enormous. Currently, now we are performing treatment of osteoarthritis using these adipose-derived stem cells. The procedure looks like we use small amount of fat, we isolate and cultivate these cells into our laboratory, then we collect them, and these cells are injected into the knee or hip of patients suffering from osteoarthritis.
And I'm interested in the question of whether the intuition and enhancement technology increases happiness and well-being is justified. Can enhancement technologies increase human well-being? By the way, can you hear? Do I have to raise my voice or am I allowed to hear? Important findings in research in psychology, such as the hedonistic trend theory, seem to indicate that enhanced abilities will not increase human well-being on the long term. However, all depends on which account of well-being is from. Enhancement technology may not increase our subjective well-being, if not in a profound way, but may contribute to our objective well-being. If that is the case, what are the implications? Do we have sufficient reason to pursue enhancement technologies? Is the increase of objective well-being sufficient? Or may there be even other reasons beyond well-being for pursuing enhancement technology? Before I go on to describe some of these psychological findings, I have to make clear which definitions of happiness and well-being I'm going to use. For the purposes of this talk, I will stipulate these terms in the following way. A common way of understanding well-being is by making a distinction between subjective and objective well-being. And I understand this as a synonym for subjective well-being, and in the rest of my talk I will use the term subjective well-being. Subjective well-being refers to the idea of how good or bad a life feels from the inside. It is based on the idea that the judgment of an individual's well-being must reflect the individual's point of view. Whether an individual's life is a good life is cultivated with the individual. Popular theoretical views on well-being in this sense are simple hedonism. Happiness is the dominance of pleasure over pain. Emotional state theory. Happiness is possessing a preponderance of positive emotional states. And the life satisfaction theory, which holds that happiness is the judgment that your life is going well on the whole. Now, objective well-being is judging how life is actually going for someone, whether or not she realizes it. It is the judgment of a well-informed sympathetic observer that some goods will contribute to well-being independent of the attitude of the individual. Or as Valerie Tiberius defines it, a person's life goes well to the extent that it includes or instantiates certain objectively good things. The goodness of these things for the person is not explained by the liking them, wanting them, being pleased or satisfied with them, or having any other subjective response. A well-known phenomenon that has gained interest and has been further developed and studied in the field of positive psychology is the hedonic treadmill, also known as hedonic adaptation. Hedonic treadmill is a term coined in 1971 by Brickman and Campbell. And Brickman observed that the tendency of humans to quickly return to a relatively stable level of performance, despite major positive or negative effects on life. The person makes more money, more expectations and desires rise at the same time. And as a result, the person will not be better off. There will be no permanent gain in happiness. Hence, the treadmill has to keep walking just to stay in the same place. The process of hedonic adaptation involves cognitive changes, such as that you shift your values, or you shift your attention, your goals, or you change the interpretation of situations you're in. Hedonic adaptation has been the object of research since then, there's a continuing debate on how valid the theory is. So some studies show that the degree of adaptation after an injury is not 100%, as Brickman and his colleagues concluded, but closer to 30 or 50%. Others argue that happiness set points can change. Not everyone returns to the same neutral point after a life event. And some others argue that individuals vary in the rate and extent of adaptation that they experience of change in circumstances. Hedonic adaptation is comparable to another observed phenomenon, that is preference driven. A higher income may increase your subjective well-being, but your aspirations and preferences are changed as well, and as a result, part or most of the effect disappears. Maja Stojiljković argued in her article on adaptive preferences that adaptation can also occur in the context of enhancement. Adaptation of our wants and desires to our options and possibilities can occur with the opening of new options provided by the enhancement technology. And the idea behind the hedonic treadmill, hedonic adaptation, is that subjective well-being is relative. More goods, new options, such as the enhancement technology may provide, create new preferences while subjective well-being stays the same. People are continually striving for the next thing that may make them happy. Subjective well-being may also be socially relative. It depends on how we measure ourselves compared to others. One's happiness is affected by one's position relative to others of the group. This seems to be supported by studies on income and well-being. For example, person A works in a company that belongs to the top 10% of the paid employees of the company, and person B working in another company in the bottom 10%. But still, person B's salary is higher than person A. And although in absolute terms person B is better off, the subjective well-being may be less than person A. The economist Robert Frank refers to salary as a positional good, something that serves as a marker of our status relative to others. And such positional goods seem to have quite some impact on our subjective well-being. Although the scientific debate on the relation between subjective well-being and income is ongoing, we may conclude that it is plausible that subjective well-being is to a considerable extent relative and socially relative. Now suppose this is the case. What does it imply for the intuition that enhancement technology is good because it increases our well-being? What if enhancement technology does not increase our subjective well-being, at least not in a substantial degree? Does this imply that we have no reason to pursue enhancement technologies? At least no reasons to well-being? We may learn from hedonic agitation that although enhancement technologies may not substantially increase our subjective well-being, it may contribute to our objective well-being. Enhancement technologies makes us better off even if it does not make us happier in the sense of subjective well-being. In that case, we have to appeal to objective accounts of well-being, for example, objective lists of well-being. For example, objective goods may be the advancement of science, of art, a long healthy life, creativity, autonomy, a life full of friendship. So, enhancement technology might provide us drugs that stimulate pro-social behavior and might lead to a life full of friendship. Arguing that enhancement technology may increase objective well-being raises questions. Several authors argue that it is difficult to justify the items on the list, regardless of what people in general tend to decide or enjoy. But one may say, well, okay, that may be problematic, but as long as people in general do decide or enjoy the solution, as long as there is ample room for individual differences, then it may not be a huge problem. However, the question is whether all methods to increase knowledge or having a life with friendship are justified. For example, to increase knowledge, hitting children in the classroom, assuming that this would lead to increased knowledge, then not justified. But arguing that enhancement technology contributes to objective well-being may also have an important implication. The goods on such an objective well-being account seem to be subject to norms of satisfying and not to norms of maximizing. Such goods contribute to our well-being in a special way. Pursuing knowledge, cherishing friendship, playing music, contributing to the advancement of science seem to be meaningful activities, regardless of the quantity experiences. In contrast with enhancement technology, we may increase short-term or long-term memory, and we change our capacity in a quantitative way, but not qualitative, at least in this example. So enhancement technology does not necessarily necessarily contribute to acquire these values and improve our objective world. But there may be a reason beyond subjective and objective well-being. We may care about more than our individual well-being, and concept can help us to achieve these values, again, such as the advancement of science and art, regardless whether it contributes to objective well-being. For example, if enhancement technology contributes to our capability to responsible use and protection of the natural environment, and in this way respects the value of environmental stewardship and our moral responsibility to future generations. We'll not elaborate very much on these other reasons beyond well-being, but it might be a possibility we have to think. As a conclusion, in short, I argue that contrary to our intuitions, it isn't evident that enhancement technology will increase subjective well-being, based on a substantial and long-term way. However, it may contribute to our objective well-being. This raises some questions related to the specific character of objective well-being theories, and it has some important implications. Goods in objective accounts in general seem to be of a specific nature. They are non-positional goods. Human beings pursue such goods, but the value of such goods is in the process of achieving these goods, and not necessarily quantifying. So enhancement technology may contribute to this process, but it may also threaten it. And finally, I just stipulated that there may be also other reasons beyond well-being to pursue enhancement technology. Thank you very much.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to do a little bit different from what I promised in my abstract some months ago, but it is part of a project that I, as part of the Bioethics and Iceland, we're talking about NERI project, and that is focusing on rural enhancement. And so I'm going to discuss sort of the more from the way we speak about these issues in the public. So NERI is a European project funded by the 7th Framework Program, and we are now in the 3rd and final year, so we are sort of close to finishing, and we are trying to sort of figure out what we can draw from this experiment. And the aim of this project is to contribute, as it says, to the introduction of responsible research and innovation in euro enhancement in Europe, and has 18 partners in 11 countries. So we are using this definition of responsible research and innovation, and try to find ways to discuss euro enhancement with the public in various places in Europe. And that's challenging, and I'm going to point out some challenges that we have been facing, and we are actually starting to write a paper first on these challenges from a democratic and ethical view. So this is a definition of responsible research and innovation as it has been used by Europe or EU, and it's from Schoenberg, and this is something that we have been sort of using. And it says, it's a transparent, interactive process by which societal actors and innovators become mutually responsive to each other with a view to the ethical acceptability, sustainability, and societal desirability, etc. The idea is to, having with responsible research has to be interactive with the public. Sooner the better to have this debate about what the goal is, how can we both the public know what is going on and also how can scientists respond to their concerns and to societal needs. So that's the idea. So the idea is to establish dialogues between all stakeholders as very soon in the process, or sooner the better, but and sort of course continue throughout. So the aim of NERI, this project, was to promote this societal dialogue with mutual learning exercises. And they can take different forms, and we are also sort of so we are doing several things. We are focusing on neural enhancement, and then we are also trying to figure out what are the best ways to establish this dialogue with the public. So, and what, how do different methods work? And then, so we have we did interviews to begin with, and we have workshops and all kinds of activities, and it's to ensure this technology research and innovation proceeds in ethically acceptable socially desirable directions. And then the final aim is to come up with policy recommendations. And that's going to be challenging, of course, and that is something that we have to, that's sort of the final stage, and it's being prepared, and it remains to be seen what's really going to be in the content of such recommendations. So we have had more than 60 MLEs, so these mutual learning exercises, over in different countries. And they have taken on different forms. There have been science cafes in many countries, gaming events, expert workshops. So it's try to be also innovative in finding ways to get people engaged and active and really to figure out what their concerns are. And I think we can safely say that we have been successful in at least in many cities or countries in raising awareness to put this neural enhancement on the agenda, inviting people to take part in this dialogue. Whether we succeed to draw from this, for instance, some important inputs for recommendations, that remains to be seen, as I said. So this is just one example of posters from these events in many places. So why was neural enhancement chosen for this project? That is, there are several different ways. One is that it's, of course, there are recent advances, as you know, are controversial. There are also these this topic tends to polarize, and we are utopian and dystopian, and we have many, I think most people know of all kinds of novels and movies that present that. It's easy to get people interested in the topic, it's easy, it draws attention, and people do not know much, and they are keen to learn. So it's an topic to choose, and I think that has been proven. There are many ethical issues that have been addressed by the public concerns, and we have tried in many of these events. We have had people writing down their concerns at the end with some questionnaires. So we have been able to draw out these concerns, and none of them maybe are very surprising. There's been a lot of discussion about the distinction between therapy and enhancement, the question of autonomy and freedom,
It turns out that people are often, and as we know, people are really interested in trying out all kinds of things, because we are, of course, thinking of healthy people, and it seems like people are very interested in that, and why should people not be allowed to try if they want to, and it's an informed consent. There has been a lot of discussion about competitiveness and solidarity, and this sometimes seems to be different from one country to another. We think we see a difference that, for instance, in some countries like in Scandinavia, or in countries where political system is such that it is very much on equality and solidarity, and people are more concerned about that than maybe in the UK. This is just something we need to establish more thoroughly, though, to really be able to say that with certainty. So there are some further studies that we want to do, and very coming from these ideas we seek to think about differences between age groups and even maybe some gender groups. And with that, it would be very interesting to follow this with more maybe surveys and concrete these analyses. But there are challenges, of course, with this kind of public dialogue that we have to be aware of. Emily's attract people who are already in it. It's a self-selected group. So those who come are interested maybe already. And those who are most vocal in a group or take part in the dialogue may be more interested than the rest of the group. This is, of course, people who have access to public media, are educated, are already sort of active in the society, because that's the way these events have been advertised through, of course, media, social media, and so on. The aim is, of course, to have an open and balanced dialogue about this. But still, I mean, we see that when we look at the list of all the enemies, that of course they have all kinds of, titles that already imply a lot of things, like, super brain, superhuman, better, smarter, wiser. It's already trying to get people to come. We have to obviously use words that are maybe polarized in a way. So but still we want to have this dialogue balance. It's a tension there. And of course terminology is often unclear. I mean, we have been discussing enhancement here, the meaning of enhancement is different, or there are many different understandings of enhancement. Of course has very positive flavor, and it's also interesting because we have to I come from Iceland, and in Icelandic we don't have a fixed term for enhancement, and there has been a lot of debate just about how to translate this term, and that's an interesting thing to when we are discussing this between countries and try to compare. And does it have to have a positive flavor as it is in English, or how do we understand these things? It's also challenging to get participants to engage without too much influence. So we of course tend to have these issues sort of open with polarized, maybe people with very different views. So the dialogue is already framed very much. So and that is something that we have to ask ourselves. I mean, how can we really are we really opening up for radical enough views if we are already framed it in a positive way, for instance, and so on and so on. So this is Yes. And then, of course, I mean, we have, sometimes we have been, and some of these analyses have been related to some, even in a cinema, talking about the movies or documentaries or something. And of course, the people have all kinds of ideas already coming from the movies and the entertainment business. And the question is that really helpful? Is it really maybe polarizing the debate even more? So these are some of the concerns that we have been speaking of. That's where I'm going at.
So my name is Ewelina Sokolowska, and I'm going to talk about biosocial complexity and the precarious prospect of biological moral enhancement technology. That's the original title of my presentation, but the more I was thinking about what I want to say, I noticed that the word precarious probably is not the perfect word, but then I couldn't find any better one, so I decided to just leave it, and maybe you can come up with some better suggestion. What kind of prospects are there based on my argument? And first, I would like to start saying something about my background, because the whole field is totally new for me. Bioethics and in moral enhancement, biological enhancement, and I'm a political scientist by trade. So all my formal training was done with political science, but for the last couple of years I was learning a lot of philosophy, looking mostly at ontological issues within biological sciences. For example, what are genes actually? How should we understand their mode of the mode of working? How they work, and how should we think about biological causality? So when I stumbled upon the topic of human enhancement, then I realized that these two topics, or two fields, come together, and probably we have to understand two sides, or politics and philosophy, in order to understand human enhancement, and in order to approach the issue of human enhancement in general. And this merging is exactly what I want to talk about today, because I want to look at the idea of biological moral enhancement from a perspective of an ontological argument, and more precisely from an ontological perspective that is mostly known as complex dynamic systems. I will explain it in a moment. And I want to ask, what would be the implications of taking such an ontological perspective seriously for the question of biological moral enhancement? So we start with the ontological part. Complex dynamic systems has been mostly seen as a response to kind of traditional ways of thinking about materialism, where such aspects are included as reductionism, linear causality, causal determinism more in general. And so there was mostly philosophical side into it, so how we should think about materialism in a very abstract way. But then on the other hand, this new way of thinking started to seem more realistic as more and more discoveries start to come from biological sciences or natural sciences in general. So for many social sciences or scientists in general, it seems it's maybe a bit paradoxical that the ontological model that we often associate with natural sciences start to be undermined and redefined by natural sciences themselves. And I look at 3 cases in my own research where there are more and more discoveries coming that kind of redefine our understanding of materialism. For example, when we think about genetics, how we used to think about genes more in this kind of representationalist way, genes as representing something, a picture that worked very fine under Mendelian genetics, but the more and more we learn from the more advanced genomics, we start to understand that's probably not the best ontological picture of genes that we can have. That the way we can understand genes, or the better way to understand genes, it will be the systematic way. So genes as a factor that makes a difference, but it makes a difference in this complex or in a system of factors that all interact with each other. So maybe how we can understand genes is in this systemic way. So that was one case. Then another case is brain sciences. When it seems that there's still this ghost of neuroreductionism still very much alive in the way neurosciences are talked about. And by neuroreductionism, I mean the tendency of trying to understand people by reducing them to their brains. This kind of very famous phrase, the mind is the brain, which is used in a very pragmatic way. And then, of course, our main mental states are very much ontologically dependent on the brain. But only the brain is seen as this kind of embodied organ. We have bodies that influence how the brain works, and of course the brain influences how the body works. So you cannot disentangle the two from each other. And then another part that the brain is embodied but also embedded in the world. So you cannot understand our mental states and our actions without seeing our positionality in the world. So that was one part of the critique that started to come on with more and more discoveries coming from brain sciences, seeing brain as the self-organizing system, working with many different factors together, being influenced by many factors, and influencing all the other factors as well. And together with they can think of another aspect, which is connected to neuroreductionism, and it is neurodeterminism. That there's still this tendency in correlational studies of a certain way of brain structure, or how the brain is structured, or how the brain functions, is correlated with some kind of behavior. There's this tendency to assume that it was the brain that was the cause of that certain behavior, not seeing the possibility that it could be a case of more circular causality. So brain, of course, influencing how we behave, but the kind of behavior that we produce feeds back into the whole system and makes us even more who we are. And then the third case I was looking at is evolutionary biology and the growing critique of the model of modern synthesis, which is still very much dominant model of how we think about evolution nowadays. And I just want to shortly say that the main assumption in the modern synthesis is that the only thing that we inherit are genes. And so the understanding of evolution within modern synthesis is just base genes, gene-based. So evolution is increase in genes in a population. You probably all know that the definition. And then there comes a critique that, well, if you think about it, genes are not the only thing that we inherit from past generations. We inherit epigenetic marks, that is a new thing going on. But also we inherit the environment from our ancestors. We learn behaviors and culture. So there's much more that we inherit. So there's the critique right now of a so-called extended inheritance. So not only looking at genetic mechanisms of inheritance, but also different non-genetic ones. And then once again, based on that critique, it seems that we should understand evolution also more in terms of complex dynamic systems. So understanding organisms as this complex of different factors that evolve in time, so they are dynamic. instead of just looking at more or less stable genes that only sometimes mutate them. So these were three examples that I think shows that this kind of ontological model is not only some kind of abstract model that some philosophers came up with, but it actually seems that it's probably the most plausible model that we can have right now. So then I was saying, what will be the implications for the topic that we're discussing at this conference? If we think, okay, it's probably the most realistic ontological model that we can have, organisms are complex dynamic systems. So what would the implications be for example, some kind of neural enhancement? We can change brain chemistry in criminals, for example. And probably there are many different possible implications, but I decided to keep it very simple today. And I decided to look at the two main components of this ontological model, the complex side and the dynamic side. So starting with the complex side, so that part that says that organisms are complex systems, behaviors and mental states or the behaviors that we produce are always a result of interactions between these different factors that probably cannot be disentangled from each other. Then in view of this, it probably be very problematic to focus on and prioritize just one particular part of the system, as for example brain chemistry. And then follow up, a decision to intervene in just one particular part of the system would also start to be problematic and would be a very much political decision. There is this whole debate within social science, is a criminal because of his individual decision or some kind of his biology, or is it because of the society that he did? And it's a very old debate, but I think this kind of model makes it even clearer for us that there are many factors, and if we just decide to focus on one factor, it's not that unproblematic. It's political in the sense, in a very wide sense, so it's not necessary decision. If we could have chosen something else, or to do something else. And then the dynamic part. So we are complex organisms, and organisms that are in time. So we always evolve. So the way I am this minute is not the same as I will be in 1 minute, because I always change, or the world always changes. So there's this inherent dynamism in the world, in all the systems. And of course, it's not random how I will change. It's path dependent. It's in some way determined, but I'm not sure if it's deterministic. It's probably more probabilistic. And even though there will be some stability between how I am right now, how I'll be in 5 minutes, there's always this possibility of disrupting the system and bringing a change about. If one factor will be to do an earthquake, my system will be disrupted. And I cannot exclude that possibility. So even though there is a stability in my existence, this stability is always very much dynamic. If one factor changes, probably maybe the stability will be disrupted and will fall. Or some other stability will be possible to develop. And because of that, 2 minutes. And because of that dynamic inherent dynamism in these kind of complex systems, there is also a degree of unpredictability, because if we decide to intervene in one factor, we don't know how it will influence all the other factors. We don't know how it will influence the whole system. Maybe it will disrupt the system. We don't know. So when deciding to enhance or to intervene in one factor, we should be aware of that we don't have full control. So it will also be we should be aware that because we don't have full control, it will be a political decision to make this kind of intervention, and we should be aware of that. And here I come to conclusions. conclusions in 1 minute. The question is, are we doomed to set some kind of scientific and ethical nihilism? Because, okay, we are not in full control. There are many different factors that interact with each other, and we probably will not be able to get to know them all, how they influence each other and so on. And my answer is, well, not, and then the question would be that doesn't mean that we cannot enhance, or should we enhance them altogether? Well, not necessarily. When it comes to science, what we need is to focus more on understanding certain mechanisms and interactions between these different factors. So trying to avoid the trouble of reduction, so just focusing on one part of the system, for example, brain. And just because science has shown us that there is some correlation between how the brain works and a certain behavior that is produced, we should not then just assume that it will be an ecological decision to intervene in the brain. And when it comes to ethics of enhancement, well, the conclusion would be that we can act, but then we should act with an awareness of an inherently political nature of any of our decisions. Political, once again, in its wide sense, that it's not necessarily, and we could have done a little bit differently. So avoid the illusion of full control. And the time is up, so thank you so much.
My name is Toni Pustovrh. I come from Slovenia, from the Faculty of Social Sciences, and today I'll try to give you an overview of what kind of ethical, legal, and societal implications and regulatory options have been discussed among European national ethics advisory bodies regarding the use of psychopharmaceuticals and non-invasive brain stimulation devices for the purpose of cognitive enhancement. So generally, we have a really wide list of technologies that would potentially serve to enhance human capabilities. Many of them are still in the research and development phase, some are still purely theoretical, but there are some that are already available and are coming into, let's say, limited or in some cases also widespread use. So if I oversimplify a bit, we can divide these technologies into various areas regarding which kind of intervention they would facilitate in regard to human enhancement. And here I'd like to focus on cognitive enhancement. But as we've already discussed yesterday, we should keep in mind that all of these fields, especially in the neural enhancement category, are strongly interlinked, and it's basically hard to separate them strictly. So cognitive enhancement can be seen as a subfield of human enhancement, or a type of mind or neural enhancement that targets specific mental abilities or states, or capacities and faculties of the mind. And we shouldn't forget the strong interlinkage between how effective our cognition is and what kind of mood state or what kind of motivation we have. So here are some definitions that we can use to kind of try to work out what cognitive enhancement is. One is the use of interventions to improve cognitive functioning and performance, where these are not impaired in clinically significant ways. So capabilities such as attention, understanding, reasoning, learning, and memory. Or the improvements in cognitive performance which are not intended to pursue therapeutic or preventative goals, and which employ pharmacological or neurotechnical means. So here's a kind of a short and again simplified list of cognitive abilities. These entail perception, memory, attention, focus or concentration, motor abilities, language capabilities, visual and spatial skills, and various executive functions. I won't go into too much detail regarding various notions and concepts, but maybe it makes sense to just list a few discussions of what kind of definition health has, what is normality, what is average distribution, what's the difference between population level or individual enhancement, or what kind of abilities are extremes on the level of an individual or extremes at the level of the entire species or the population. And also some other notions such as how are these concepts socially constructed and what kind of pedagogical basis they have or what kind of interlinks forms them. So here are some of the technologies that have been suggested or can be used to increase cognitive capabilities. Again, some are more theoretical or more in the research and development phase. But we also have some very traditional or established strategies and interventions such as nutrition, knowledge systems, physical training systems, or sleep, for example. And there are some that are already widespread and not problematized as much as the new ones. Those are the external computational systems and the computers and the smartphones that basically every one of us uses. But here I focus on those that are more contentious. Those are the psychopharmaceuticals and the non-invasive brain stimulation technologies, more specifically transcranial direct current stimulation. So regarding psychopharmaceuticals, the ones most often mentioned in the literature are methyl candidate, that is Ritalin, amphetamines such as Adderall, and modafinil such as Provigil or Modafinil. There are also some illicit drugs and nutritional supplements, but I'd like to keep them by the side as they form a different category, different legal category, and they also have different magnitudes of effects. So regarding the psychopharmaceuticals, they kind of have a dual use. They can be used to treat specific diseases or disorders, and on the other hand, in at least some healthy individuals, they can have cognitive effects that vary in their degree and their scope. So here is a short rundown of transcranial direct current stimulation. It's basically a device that you put on your head. It consists of 2 electrodes and it sends a big current to different parts of your brain. And according to some studies, it can facilitate the improvement in some types of cognitive abilities, at least in some individuals. And again, it's used for various purposes. It can be a neuroscientific research tool, it can be a therapeutic tool, and some studies and some people claim that it can be also a cognitive enhancement tool. So just as an aside, maybe I'd like to remind you that we already have chemical substances that are legal, that are widespread, and that most of us use that enhance cognition, such as caffeine in coffee and tea, and nicotine in tobacco and cigarettes. That was just as an aside. So regarding the ethical, legal, and societal aspects, what's been primarily discussed are the safety and efficacy of such cognitive enhancements technologies. For those two that I previously mentioned, the side effects are usually minor and transitory, although the pharmaceuticals have some potential for addiction, especially the amphetamines have a strong potential for addiction. But this only goes for short-term and low dosage use, because most of the studies have been performed. And that's, so basically don't know what kind of side effects or generally what kind of effects long-term and higher doses will have. Whether the safety will be impaired, whether there will be side effects, possibility of addiction, and the development of tolerance. And also we don't know what kind of effects it can have on developing brains and also brains that are atypical or regarding individual variation between people. So one issue that I find most problematic is the context of usage, because I think that for many people the use of such devices can lead to long-term deprivation of sleep, of relaxation, and of rest, and that really can have negative impacts such as chronic overwork and burnout. So in the literature, aside from improvements at the individual level, what's mostly been discussed are societal savings from the increased numbers of accidents and errors that result from too low vigilance and too low attention. And on the other side, there has been discussion of decreases in cognitive, the reduction of time and resources that are needed for learning or for acquiring new skills. But what's been often missing, or what has been emphasized in many studies, is that we need more rigorous empirical studies, and also that overhyped expectations need to be tempered with. So here's another short list of the main, let's say, ethical and societal aspects that we usually discussed in the literature. Those pertain to personal identity, autonomy, and authenticity, also whether the use of such technologies constitutes cheating in specific contexts. There have been discussions of distributed justice and access, of direct and indirect coercion, either it's in the school or in the workplace, and also uses in specific contexts for the treatment and rehabilitation of deviants, and also for military uses. Maybe at least some of you know that the military is the only institution that has a specific formal protocol on when and how the use of modafinil can be instituted in specific combat situations, as opposed to other professions. So why is this discussion of these technologies important? Because they are both currently available at reasonably low costs in a commercial market, there is existing use among students, among various professions, among especially biohackers and self-experimenters in the do-it-yourself community. There's much talk on various Reddit threads, you can see it on various pages on the internet. There's been a lot of media coverage recently, and it's also going up in recent years, so that kind of serves as an indirect promotion. And recently modafinil has been the subject of a meta-study that has found that it consistently engenders cognitive enhancement effects and that it has a low preponderance for side effects. So regarding from that kind of promotion, let's say we can expect that its usage will probably increase, at least among some populations. So it's no surprise that it comes to the attention of various experts, advisory bodies and policymakers, and there have also been some discrepancies as to how it's currently situated in the regulatory frameworks. Pharmaceuticals are currently part of the medical or healthcare framework, but they also fall into the category of illicit drugs, and they are mostly available in kind of a gray zone or black market. The TDCS is currently unregulated in the consumer market. It falls among general electronics currently, but there have been calls to make it part of or subject to medical acts that regulate medical devices in order to ensure the safety and efficacy. So all this opens questions of regulation and societal engagement in order to ensure safety, efficacy, and realize the potential benefits and minimize the potential harms. Just briefly, here's a list of what percentage of students have been found in various servers who have used pharmaceutical cognitive enhancers. Just you can see that usage is existing, although sometimes it has been a bit overblown. So, finally, getting to national ethics advisory bodies. Those are usually official national ethics committees. Those are permanent bodies that provide policymakers and also other stakeholders, and generally also the public, with advice on the legal, societal, and bioethical aspects of new technologies and treatments. So here's a list of the national ethics advisory bodies and the titles of the documents that have been produced regarding enhancement aspects of issues with regard to pharmaceuticals and with regard to transcranial direct current stimulation for enhancement purposes. Concerning how many of them have mentioned the various technologies, you can see that most of them have discussed pharmaceuticals. Some have discussed both pharmaceuticals and transcranial direct current stimulation, and nothing has discussed also in a separate document for the transcranial direct current stimulation. And you can see that many of the documents have been produced in 2013, so it seems that the years between 2011 and 2013 have been kind of the high point of interest, at least for now, among ethical advisory bodies in this topic. So all of them have discussed various ethical, legal, and societal implications that I've already mentioned previously, although the NAFID documents have mentioned enhancement mostly as a side issue. They discussed these technologies mostly in the therapeutic concept, in the therapeutic context. France has also discussed some deeper conceptual issues, although they've mostly presented all the arguments and issues in a negative light and mostly regarding harms, so basically no benefits there. And also put forward public policy options. So again, an oversimplified taxonomy of what kind of regulatory options we have available. There's the laissez-faire approach, the hands-off approach, the reason pro cognitive enhancement approach that kind of embraces part of it, but not all of it. And then there's the reasoned cognitive enhancement restrictive approach, which is more, let's say, negative towards various uses, and there's also the prohibition. And issues that are also usually discussed are whether enhancement should be tolerated, supported, encouraged, or restricted, and whether or how specific vulnerable groups can be protected and how coercion can be prevented. So here's how the documents kind of fit in the whole thing. This is not entirely accurate because maybe more accurate would be if I placed the documents that are currently under the reason pro enhancement approach somewhere between the reason pro enhancement approach and somewhere between the reason restrictive approach. And the last documents would fall between the reason restrictive approach and between prohibition. So this is kind of an aggregate of what has been discussed in the documents that fall under the reason pro enhancement approach. Primarily, they put most emphasis on respect and safeguarding individual decision-making autonomy. So they take steps to kind of ensure that, and they don't take any steps that would specifically prohibit anything that individuals wanting to do. They tend to assume that safety and responsible use can be ensured through the pharmaceutical regulatory system, that research should be expanded on various uses and how it pertains to everyday life, that it should be obtainable as part of the private market, but it should be subject to professional medical standards. Employers should not require employees to take such psychopharmaceuticals, but they should allow voluntary use. And also there should be public educational risks and benefits, and also alternatives to cognitive enhancement technologies, such as the traditional ones that I mentioned previously. And the recent restrictive approach usually focuses on the negative societal impacts and tries to influence the conditions under which enhancement could take place. So it leaves open the option that use could be restricted to specific professions or situations where such use might be warranted. But it also says that physicians should remain as the gatekeepers of such, especially psychopharmaceuticals, although it doesn't say much about transcranial recurrent stimulation. And also that there should be new organizations, or that organizations that are involved in education and professional labor should discuss such issues and try to prevent harms coming to their employees. And there's also much of the discussion whether it should be available, whether such technology should be available as part of the healthcare system regarding distributive justice. So generally, a good policy would ultimately engage regulators, scientists, and experts, as well as the do-it-yourself community, and should be backed by rigorous empirical data in crafting policy proposals that ensure public safety, and also leave some room open for supporting innovation. On the individual level, I feel that such technologies can have a strategic use for personal needs and goals, but that individuals should also take into account that there are sometimes more effective or means that have additional benefits that are already established and have a long tradition, such as proper nutrition, exercise, proper sleep, rest, relaxation, mind training, meditation, things that we practically all know, but that few of us have the time to implement. So, in this I'd like to just give you a short commercial bit. Here's a webpage that I maintain for Center for Social Sciences. If you're interested, you can visit it on Facebook or just put it into Google and you can find the Center for Social Studies and Science. So, thank you very much.
Everybody was on time. Now, should we all come up and all four? Bring up 4 chairs. We got to stay. So who wants to? Rob, you want to start us off? Oh, thanks.
So a question and a comment for Professor Bolt. I guess I found that quite convincing, and I really want to believe in the argument that you've made. But it seems to me that a sort of serious advocate for enhancement would say 2 things. One, that the phenomenon that you described as limiting the usefulness of enhancement for increasing subjective well-being might themselves be the kind of things that we could remove by enhancement. So thinking about genetic modification or selection to change people's ethnicity set points, to increase their willingness to ignore positional goods. So there'll be some enhancements that might well be able to overcome the problems that you identified for subjective well-being. Now, the suggestion that objective goods are not subject to a logic of maximisation, I find, I think that's a fascinating idea, but it doesn't seem right for all objective goods. So think about longevity. And there's 2 problems. One, some of them you might well want to go a long way to enhance them to longevity. So longevity, it looks like it's objectively good, and it doesn't look like the sort of thing you do it immediately and satisfies. And then, of course, even if you establish that we should satisfy some of these things, we might satisfy way above what we currently think of as being an adequate amount of these objective goods. So for granted that I don't want to maximise my experience of beauty, for instance, but I might well want to satisfy that 1,000 times what I'm currently capable of enjoying. So it seems to me that there's a range of responses from a serious advocate for enhancement that you might want to say more about.
Was it respected the language first point with respect to subjective well-being? Is that a pro-welfarist account? Individual might say, well, subject enhancement technology, there might be some ways to enhance it in different software.
Well, I mean, we could give everyone a lifetime supply of heroin for a start. That's a lifetime supply of heroin for a start. Or you could, I mean, you could drug people up in ways that at least they would enjoy pleasure, whether that's happiness is another question. But take this idea that, you know, I get happy and then I cease to enjoy goods because I've got some sort of base genetically determined ethnicity set point. Well, we just modify that. We reset that. Future individuals will be capable of enjoying more pleasure than we can by their nature.
So, if I'm correct, so well, we can raise the set point.
Yes.
The set point. Yeah, I thought about that. Well, okay, let's gradually, if that would be possible, raise the happiness set point. Would that really increase our well-being? Because how much joy can we take? Almost,
but more than we experience. I mean, someone who wants to argue, look, enhancement can increase subjective well-being.
yeah.
And if you care about subjective well-being, it seems clear that you can have more than any human being can currently experience. Why not? I mean, we don't have this technology, so it's an imaginary scenario. But certainly there are transhumanists out there who will say in the future we're all going to live lives of tremendous ecstasy for thousands of years. Why? Because we will change our nature such that we don't experience the problems that we describe that currently limit our subjective well-being.
But I even can't grasp such a scenario because it somehow seems that you need kind of to raise your set point to really enjoy that also two sides, you know. I think that if you're unhappy with something, you're going to try to improve something, and then eventually your well-being will be raised. It's such a strange thing to think of a situation that you are happy in such a high level of all kind of situations, life situations. Whether you can even experience that as a life for well-being is strange to me. Do you understand what? So if all the aspects of your life, like friendship, succeed in work, if everything goes well, then it's super, and then to raise your set point is hardly understandable for me what the incentive would be, what the reason would be.
I'm not sure how far to take it. I mean, some people wake up in the morning and the sunrise makes them ecstatic. Some people wake up in the morning and the sunrise is I'm going to be the person who makes me ecstatic. And you can offer me an enhancement technology that every morning something comes up and I go, woohoo! That seems like an obvious thing. And its enhancement, I mean, certainly some people in the enhancement literature just think that the limitations that you describe that relate to contingent features of our nature are precisely the sort of thing that enhancement should target and change. So then we would, which is essentially to say enhancement could well increase subjective well-being. It just needs to target those features of nature that you describe as limiting.
This is a very interesting conversation. I just want to make sure that other people get a chance to jump in with questions to Ineke or to others.
Your presentation, particularly
for a workplace environment and regulation there? Because I guess I'm concerned how effective regulation could be. So for example, you talk about, okay, it's a professional group, say like pilots, or you talk about the military, it's like, okay, here's some clear guidelines when you can, when you shouldn't, and maybe there's some internal policing mechanisms within those environments, but I think it's workplace more broadly. I mean, if certain enhancement pharmaceuticals, say, are just widely available on the marketplace, and your employer has not specified, and let's say it's even illegal for them to test you for it, then, okay, I start taking an enhancement, my productivity goes up. I get rewarded for my enhancement. Not because I'm enhancing, but just my productivity is up. And therefore, I get promotions and so on and others, so that it creates this social pressure environment, other people that, okay, I gotta keep up with Jason, I better start enhancing too. So, a lot of concern that people have with, even though the principal objection to enhancement, they worry about the Pandora's box. Again, it's not slippery slope concern per se, but simply that, if we say, okay, it's acceptable under certain conditions, how can we regulate when those conditions are being met and stop the enhancement use in other conditions?
I mean, I agree with that. I don't have any recipe for that. What's been discussed is, as you already mentioned, possible workplace drug tests, but I don't think that it's all anything. I mean, you can see anonymously in the doping in the sports debates how far that has gone and how effective it was. So, generally, I mean, as long as things are available, people will use them, I guess. So, some suggestions that have been made were more in the sense of workplace reforms, let's say, in the sense that people would be given would be under less pressure to perform better, even more free time. I mean, but again, in the current society, I don't see that trend coming into vogue anytime soon. So basically, I don't see any mechanism involved in that sense. And what's also problematic in that regard is usually the fact that sometimes people say, okay, you're more productive, you can do the work that you did previously in 8 hours in the time of 4 hours now, but that won't mean you have an additional 4 hours of time. It just means that you have to do twice as much of course, so that's another issue.
You can't make worse go than meditate.
Yeah. So that is the case, yeah, especially in the workplace.
I think that the most important concern with bioenhancement at all are criteria for enhancement. For example, if we can imagine that we can make a human being at this moment absolutely more or better, we can also imagine that a good human being wants to become more good. And many bad human beings don't feel necessity to become better. Probably. The second problem is concerned, I think, with the definition of objective or subjective good. If we accept utilitarianism ethic, or we can accept Kant's categorical imperative, because we try to establish one universal, one general moral law based on free will. and that's it. That's my comment, but I'm interested to know what do you think about that our problem to define the or who should be better in cognitive or in ethical sense, and we also have to distinguish and to define an individual good, public good, subjective good, objective good, etc.
A lot of different questions. We started with a gap that might appear between the good guys who want to be even better and the better guys who don't care. That's not enough. I don't think I need all kinds of assumptions, and I'm not sure whether all the assumptions might be. But with respect to subjective and objective well-being, and who decides who have to be enhanced, that's also one of the questions. And I think that, well, in that case, I think as most of us will, that of course, it's up to the individual. But of course, you can't just say, well, it's up to the individual. We as a democratic country, as for example, one of the project that you did, kind of engage the public in deliberating on what kind of enhancement technologies and in what kind of conditions we have to set. And I think the way we have to do it, and how to come up with another way of that.
For example, moral human beings want to become better, and for example, just imagine that deep brain stimulation can help him to become better. But many bad people don't want to become better.
Coercion again, discussed previously, whether people that are in the deviant category can be forced to undergo some specific treatment. I guess, to some extent, we're already doing that now with incarceration. Let's say chemical castration is currently performed on a voluntary basis. I guess it depends on which category we place such individuals.
I think that question is directed to Salvor Nordal. So, the question, yes,
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to thank Ewelina Sokolowska for a extremely well-argued presentation, and I think it's a very interesting phenomenon here, also in this conference, that the complex dynamic system fact that is kind of put aside from the enhancement discussion, and I find it interesting, an interesting phenomenon which takes place in the kind of inherent self-legitimation of neglecting the fact of this complex dynamic system and the almost undeniable reductionism that kind of takes place in the discussion without a lot of attention to these facts, and that the enhancement discussion really does not take a lot of stance for the relationship with this reductionism while making suggestions that are kind of undeniably reductionist. So thank you for your presentation, and I hope to have some more discussion of this phenomenon.
Should I comment on your comment? Or
By all means.
Yeah, I think it's a scary tendency that, well, I arrived today, so I couldn't listen to so many presentations, unfortunately, but I think there is this tendency of thinking about neural enhancement, moral enhancement, technology enhancement in general as something apolitical, because it's based on science and it's because technology, and I think it's problematic, because why should we choose to enhance people by changing the brain chemistry and not, for example, by changing social structure? That question is put aside because we focus so much on technology that we gain.
Yeah, exactly. And apparently after this talk, some of the next comments might be like detailed notions of some proposed moral enhancement and how that should work. And again, this is taken aside while the conversation kind of continues. So I find this very interesting.
I'll resist it.
No.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking, of course, it's reductions, but I think many academics discussions are like, if you talk about poverty and you or if you talk about, for example, scarcity of resources in medical healthcare, then of course you don't address global poverty and the differences of the world. Is just an angle to take the discussion. So I think it's so important to take into account the social context, and I'm really happy, for example, your presentation, but I just think it's an angle to do that. And I don't know, I don't think that anybody assumes that it's good to focus on moral enhancement and not about inequalities. It's just, I don't know, I would be not careful to say like, yeah, to have these really strong ideas about the reductionism on the debate. Yeah, it's just a comment, but it's I think important.
And just very good. I mean, there really has been among enhancement debaters, people who have taken more what you call protectionist, black law focus or mechanistic view, people who have taken more complex systems. So this is it's an ongoing.
Well, to say that, I think that we see, at least sort of my experience, that in this public debate, these complex issues are very much addressed. People are really thinking about the society, the effect of the society, other means, rather than, I think that's because the scientists come up with, come with technology and maybe a little bit sort of narrow vision, but I think that is one thing that we can make draw from this more open debate.
I want to say something about the NERD project. It really strikes me as a non-humanist project in the sense that it's more democratic, it's more inclusive, it has other voices in society to be heard. Maybe there was flavors, if I understand correctly, to many of the LLEs which you conducted. And I must say that at first, my first reaction was sort of recoil from this, and I said, oh no, let it